everremodeling.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So the DOJ secured a superseding indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center, this massive, well-funded hate group that pretended to be in the business of rooting out hate, while in fact it was not only promoting it, because they're identitarian race hustlers, it was underwriting it. Again, for those not familiar, the Southern Poverty Law Center and any pro-life, pro-family organization, individuals on their hate list, their hate map. And this was used by corporations and media to tar and feather people, or to prevent them from, getting access to philanthropic dollars and contracts, etc. They claim to exist to dismantle white supremacy, but again, according to the DOJ indictment and now superseding indictment, they actually were propping up the hate. They told donors they were raising money to destroy, because you got to keep the money flowing. So you got to keep the hate going. According to the indictment, the field sources used by the Southern Poverty Law Center, they finance to attend extremist rallies, host rallies, grow existing chapters, create new chapters, recruit individuals, donate to extremist leaders, purchase cross-burning material, create racist paraphernalia, and pay living expenses for those doing all of the above. They set up fictitious entities to fund these quote-unquote field sources. And, there's many of them are named under aliases in the indictment. For example, they paid somebody that goes by the handle F9 $1.2 million. This person, F9, was in a romantic relationship with an SPLC employee. He also raised funds for the National. They paid more than $70,000 to F30, a Nazi, KKK, and Aryan Nations leader. F30 asked SPLC to help him or her leave the movement. SPLC gave that person a salary to stay and use the money to host extremist rallies, recruit members, and publish material. That's a concrete example of what was referenced generally. They gave $155,000 to F42, former chairman of the neo-Nazi National Alliance. I like this one. They paid $350,000 to an officer of the National Socialist Movement and Aryan Nations-affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club. Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club. It's good stuff. And the reason it's important to cover this superseding indictment, it's the same reason it was important to cover this, the initial indictment, is because this story cannot go away, should not go away. This cuts to the core of the identitarian scam that is being run by the left. This is an organization that had an endowment of like $750 million and created all sorts of havoc and instigated all sorts of manufactured animus for the purpose of advancing this idea that America is systemically racist, and thus we need all of these programs and the additional concentration of power, and we can use race as a cudgel to beat up our political opponents, people who just disagree with us on, for example, generally speaking, the role of government in a free society, not because they actually dislike people based on their race. For more on this and other matters, please be joined by David Harsanyi, senior writer for the Washington Examiner, co-host of the You're Wrong podcast, and author of The Rise of Blue Anon, How the Democrats Became a Party of Conspiracy Theorists. Not just conspiracy theorists, actually conspirators in the case of the SPLC. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I wish I would have known about this when I was writing my book. It would have been helpful.
Right.
Yeah, and everything, just listening to you and everything you say is right on point. But it should be mentioned that the SPLC played this game that a lot of leftists do and have for a long time, where they'll take a legitimate hate group, right, like KKK, and then right next to them put a group that is completely innocuous, fighting for liberty somewhere, and conflate those two. So they do this. This in media stories. They do this. They're constantly doing this.
No, no, exactly right. The sadistic souls motorcycle club and Moms for Liberty, same thing.
Exactly.
Right.
That sounds like a pretty interesting gang. I gotta be honest.
Yeah. No, I'm like Sons of Anarchy is coming up in my mind, but I'm probably romanticizing them more than I should.
Yeah.
I want to get your take too. Let's talk a little midterms. It's just kind of interesting. Graham Platner, a couple of things this week, not just in terms of more coming out about him, but Janet Mills, the governor, and who suspended her campaign, is running around saying, "Look, remember, I just suspended my campaign. I didn't withdraw from the race, so I'm still an option." That's number one. And number two, you've got this report that some Dem senators are meeting with Platner because there's afraid, something bad might come out because it's not quite bad enough yet.
I know. I love how the Nazi tattoo is fine, but, the texting is not fine. It seems improbable to me that something else wouldn't come out. The guy is obviously not a good person or hasn't been a good person. But it reinforces this idea I have that Democrats will never turn on anyone if there's a price to pay. Like Eric Swalwell, they knew another Democrat would just take his place. Or that woman in Texas who wanted to send Zionists to concentration camps. They knew that, that's why. But when there's a real price to pay, like now, it's going to take a lot, obviously, for them, to turn against a Democrat. I mean, in New Jersey, you have a guy who was literally volunteered for an Al-Qaeda front and defended the blind sheik, and they won't even say a word about him.
Well, yeah, I think they're. I don't think they're trying to not draw attention to him, and just leave this siloed until in conservative media as long as they can. That's what I presume.
Yeah, they do that too. I mean, it is. I do know. There's such an acceleration of this going on that it's just difficult to wrap my mind around. A little more than 20 years after 9/11, in a district just a few miles from Ground Zero, you have a guy who has all kinds of terror ties, and he's treated. It's barely a story in the mainstream media, if it is at all. I don't even know if they've covered it in the Times or anything like that.
Well, have you taken stock of the mayor of New York City? Speaking of 25 years from 9/11. Yeah, I mean,
I have.
Yeah, it's something. But here's the thing. Here's the explanation. Scott Galloway is a professor of marketing at NYU, and he does this podcast with that former Wired reporter, Kara Swisher, the lefties. And this is what he had to say on Platner, just so you understand it.
Every election is a choice, not a marriage proposal. We're not hiring a priest. We're hiring a senator. Do you want to make sure that women's rights aren't continue to be rolled back? Do you want a more responsible economic policy? Do you want different approaches to labor that raise the wages of nurses and students? Do you want something regarding fiscal sanity? Do you want to have a check against the unfettered, unprecedented corruption? But we're going to talk about tattoos and sexting? I mean, the obsession with personal purity has become a luxury belief. And folks, if your house is on fire, you don't ask whether the firefighter has problematic DMs.
Actually, the left does. The left tries to drum people out of public service or first responder services who have any ties to conservative organizations, much less extremist ones. But I digress. It's not a marriage, and you don't care what the background of the firefighter is. You just want them to put out the fire, and that's Graham Platner, David.
God, that is so pompous. And also, that's just an argument for Donald Trump and for Ken Paxton and for whoever Republicans want to vote for. It's not a marriage, right? Yet their entire, the whole Never Trump movement, and listen, I'm a skeptic. I was a skeptic. I'm a skeptic of all politicians, but that movement was predicated on the idea that he was he was ruining morality, that we were corroding decency. But now that doesn't matter. And by the way, an SS tattoo is an ideological position. It's not a DM. It's not some, And the thing is, okay, he's young. He got it when he was young, but he kept it for 20 years. And now we see that kick picture or whatever it's called, and he's covering it up because he knew what that was. So please, I mean, oh God, that listening to that is just torture, that guy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of pomposity, and since I mentioned it, Moms for Liberty, I know you, like so many, are worried about the future of the Fourth Estate now that Scott Pelley has been relieved of duty at 60 Minutes. But this is just an example of, the kind of high-level work product that Scott Pelley put forward on 60 Minutes that will no longer be accessible because he's gone. This is going after Moms for Liberty.
Parents send their children to school to be educated, not indoctrinated into ideology.
What ideology are they being indoctrinated into?
Let's just say children in America cannot read.
They often dodged questions with talking points.
You're being evasive.
21% of Hispanic students are reading on grade level.
You're being evasive. What ideology are the children being indoctrinated into? What is your fear?
I think parents' fears are realized. They're looking at these books where sexual discussions are happening with their children at younger and younger ages.
Tiffany Justice read from sexually explicit books written for older teens, but found in a few lower schools. Most people wouldn't want them in a lower school. But in a tactic of outrage politics, Moms for Liberty takes a kernel of truth and concludes these examples are not rare mistakes, but a plot to sexualize children.
The Supreme Court concluded the same thing, which is why they upheld the idea of opt-outs, parents having opt-outs for explicit materials that they don't want their kids exposed to at the primary grade level.
God, what a hack! And the idea that a library has to have these books or it's censoring someone is the inverse of reality. Right. If you're forcing some school to have to read something, that's worse. My book's not in those schools. My book on guns. Why isn't it in elementary schools? People should have it. I mean, it's just insane. I remembered that he did another segment a few years ago with Paul Ehrlich before he died.
Population bomb.
Yeah, but he didn't even mention how Paul Ehrlich had been wrong 35 times about human extinctions. And he just set him up as sort of the godfather of climate change politics and how important he was, and everything was coming true that he said, whereas almost nothing came true about what he said. So it was just complete hackery.
Right, and also all this outrage, the end of freedom of the press because Barry Weiss is the news director at CBS. I mean, it's so comical. Scott Pelley is irreplaceable. We were still trying to figure out what we're going to do when he actually passes on to his eternal reward, and now he's been cut short in the prime of his career, David. What are we to do? Because he had a disagreement with his boss, and he wouldn't be reasonable about it. So it's possible then you're out of here, because that never happens in the real world.
Gosh, take a step back and think about this. It's Barry Weiss. She's not William Buckley. She's a left center centrist who doesn't really buy a lot of the craziness. That's all she is. And they can't even handle that because these institutions are political institutions for them. They're foundational political institutions in this country for them, and they cannot let them go. So that's why they're having a hissy fit over there. And it's ridiculous. I don't even think Barry Weiss wants it to be change the ideology of things. I think she wants maybe for it to be a little more balanced, which is a completely normal thing to want in media. Yeah,
and maybe have somebody on the 60 Minutes team that's not 100 too. But please don't tell me some of the reporting that Leslie Stahl could go next. Please don't tell me that's possible. What am I going to do with myself?
When I was growing up, 60 Minutes was the premier, news magazine show. Everyone watched it, all of that. But it has gone downhill probably since they tried to Dan Rather tried to take George W. Bush down, I think. It's been just a downhill slide since then. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Leslie Stahl's trying to put a wet blanket on the Russian collusion hoax didn't age very well either, by the way. Was it 60 Minutes that kind of made Kamala Harris sound we could?
Yes.
They trimmed down they edited her answers to make them sound normal and cogent.
And that takes a lot of editing.
It was a bit overtime.
David Harsanyi, senior writer for the Washington Examiner, co-host of You're Wrong podcast, author of The Rise of Blue Anon, How the Democrats Became a Party of Conspiracy Theorists. The Rise of Blue Anon is the book. David Harsanyi, the author. David, thanks as always.
Anytime. Thank you.
And he joined us on the alphawealthgroup.com answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. On AM 560. The Answer.
When we were kids on the farm growing up, there was a weed, yellow rocket, but we always slanged it mustard.
Ben and Arvid Huth, brothers, and